is global affairs analyst Sam Phatey from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us on The World Now.
My pleasure.
Well, let's begin with the UN under its new president. Now, Espinosa is only the fourth woman to hold that position in the history of the world body. And of course, the first woman ever from Latin America and the Caribbean region. What would you say are the biggest challenges ahead of her now?
I think first of all, this position, one of our biggest challenges is mainstreaming gender equality and equity across the United Nations system when it comes to roles and responsibilities that UN officials play globally. Now, but what is more crucial and more important is the fact that world leaders are trying to look up to the United Nations when it comes to abating what could be a lot of proxy wars happening across the world, especially in the Middle East. Now, the Syrian situation has been going on for more than 7 years, and it seems like there is no near ending, and it's leading to a lot of provocations between the United States, Syria, and now Israel, and Egypt and other Arab countries are also getting quite involved when it comes to its expanding, including Yemen. So having to consolidate peace in the Middle East is very critical right now for her. But what is also important as they are about to hold their 72nd General Assembly session is that Africa is also looking for an equal voice in the United Nations, particularly in the Security Council, where you have 5 permanent members with veto powers deciding over the lives of more than 1 billion Africans. So the question is, Africans are fighting, knowing that they deserve a seat in the Security Council, a permanent seat, I mean. And so that is one thing that is going to be looked at during her tenure. And crucially, where does the ultimatum when it comes to decisions come from the General Assembly itself, or does the Security Council continue to use its veto power when it comes to their own geopolitical and geoeconomic interests? So these are some of the things that are very crucial when it comes to making the UN more democratic and more involved and giving its members equal powers.
Sam, the world is bracing for Donald Trump's second appearance at the 73rd session of the UN's General Assembly. Recall that prior to his controversial speech last year, he had withdrawn from the historic Paris Climate Agreement. He had approved the budget slash for UN funding, amongst several other steps that he took. What exactly would you say the relationship will be between UN and America under the new president?
It's obvious that the relationships are not as cozy as it was. And then the world is looking for a global leader now for the next coming years, because they can no longer rely on the American leadership as a world leader and an ally, because what the Trump administration policies are doing actually is alienating its allies. And at this defining moment, that even though Trump is about to address the General Assembly or the UN for the second time, he is more focused on his domestic politics and domestic policies right now than trying to be a global leader. So in essence here, the challenge remains for the United Nations, especially with the slashing of funding to the UN, how to raise funds. There have been billions and billions of dollars of pledges that have been committed to the UN, but none of those commitments have been translated into definite finances or definite actions on behalf of the United Nations. So in as much as the organization exists, the organization is going through a very difficult time when it comes to funding their activities. Above all, the UN is trying to tackle the worst humanitarian crisis in the history of mankind. This is the worst humanitarian crisis looking at the 1940s. We're talking about both the First World War and the Second World War combined. So those challenges also remain, and Donald Trump's administration is not. He's trying to exercise some form of leverage by holding back funds to the UN. Now, he doesn't really, I don't want to say he doesn't really care about what is happening globally to the rest of the world. He cares a lot about American interest in the Middle East. But as a businessman, I think he's looking at, look, we all have to pay our fair share of whatever the cost is for the UN to operate. America will not be able to do it alone. Trump, as a leader, knows that, look, America has a far greater responsibility, being the richest nation in the world. But he also wants to please his far right supporters to keep supporting him, especially if he has all plans to run for a second term. These were some of the promises he made during his campaign, and the only way he can keep his support base is to maintain those promises.
Let me just butt in very quickly, Sam. For Trump, it's America first, and that also inspired the trade war that we've seen play out between U.S. and China, which seem to have begun to have some ripple effect even on other countries. What role do you see the UN play in all of this?
I think the United Nations, including the U.S. representative, trade representative to the UN, who is technically a member of Trump's cabinet, have roles to play here. Now, mind you, Trump does not necessarily agree with what his his staff have to say, especially when it comes to his cabinet or the Trade Commission. He's going to end up doing what he thinks his base would cheer him for. Now, on the sideline of it sometimes, which doesn't necessarily show up in the news, is that his representatives in the back end are trying to negotiate ways to stabilize this trade war. Of course, he have put a harder, let's say the tariff increase that he put on China is high, is extremely high. China responded with a soft, a soft tariff increase. But China is looking at the fact that the more Trump puts higher tariffs on them, the more the U.S. economy and businesses in the U.S. are likely to suffer. Already there are certain companies here, including in North and South Carolina, that are shutting down, like Emerson. They have been affected by this trade war already. And it's just like Brexit. BMW is shutting down its mini manufacturing center in the UK. It's the same thing that's happening here. A lot of companies get their technology, their raw materials for their technology from China at a very cheaper price. And even at the end of the day, this manufacturing takes place right here in the United States.
Yes, right.
So a lot of jobs will be lost. So at the end of the day, I think the UN can come in to have talks between the representatives of both countries would be a long way.
Well, Global Affairs Analyst Sam Phatey, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us all the way from Washington, D.C.
Thank you.